Captain Deho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the rocky landscape of Kepler 442b. The planet was dead and cold, but it had something the human colonies needed desperately: rare minerals that could power their fastest starships. Or buried deep in the frozen ground, his small crew had been working for 3 days straight trying to extract enough materials to make the dangerous journey worthwhile. Mining operation was supposed to be simple: get and extract the minerals and get out before anyone noticed, but nothing was ever simple when humans were involved. Deho had learned that lesson many times during his 20 years as a starship captain. The galaxy was full of dangerous creatures, and most of them wanted to kill humans on sight. Jae-min, the youngest member of the crew, was operating the big mining drill when the ground started shaking. Everyone stopped working and looked around nervously. The planet was supposed to be completely dead with no geological activity, but the shaking was getting stronger, and it was coming from the direction of the old crater where they had set up their temporary base. The team engineer was checking her equipment readings when she suddenly went very pale. She looked at the scanner in her hands, then looked at it again as if she could not believe what she was seeing. "Captain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We have company, big company." Deho grabbed the scanner from her hands and felt his blood turn to ice. The readings showed at least 12 large heat signatures moving toward their position. These were not small creatures or automated machines. These were big living beings, and they were moving with purpose like hunters stalking their prey. Every human in the galaxy knew about the Valkyrie. They were the monsters that parents used to scare children into behaving. They were 8 feet tall with black scales that could deflect laser fire. Their claws could cut through spaceship hulls like paper. Their teeth were designed for tearing flesh from bone. They hunted other species for sport, and they never left survivors. The crew started grabbing their weapons, but Deho held up his hand. "Wait," he said quietly. "If these are really Valkyrie, then our weapons will not help us much. We need to think about this differently. The Valkyrie are hunters, and hunters respect other hunters. Maybe we can talk to them." Jae-min looked at his captain like he had lost his mind. "Talk to them, Captain. They eat people for breakfast. They do not talk. They just kill." The stories say they collect skulls from different species and wear them as trophies. But Deho was thinking about something he had read in an old military report. The Valkyrie were not just mindless killers. They had a complex society with honor codes and warrior traditions. Maybe, just maybe, they could be reasoned with if approached correctly. The first Valkyrie appeared at the edge of their camp just as the sun was setting. The creature was even more terrifying in person than in the pictures Deho had seen. It stood over 8 feet tall with muscles that looked like they could crush steel. Its black scales gleamed in the fading light, and its yellow eyes seemed to glow with inner fire behind. The first Valkyrie came 11 more. Each one was carrying weapons that looked like they could destroy a small building. The lead Valkyrie stepped forward, and Deho could see scars covering its arms and chest. These were marks of countless battles. This was a warrior who had survived things that would kill most creatures. The humans stood frozen as the Valkyrie leader approached. Deho could hear his crew breathing heavily behind him, but nobody moved. Nobody wanted to do anything that might trigger an attack. The Valkyrie stopped about 10 feet away and studied the humans with obvious curiosity. Then something unexpected happened. The Valkyrie leader tilted its head to one side like a dog trying to understand a strange sound. It opened its mouth and spoke in perfect human language. "Small hunters," it said, in a voice like grinding stone, "you are far from your nest. Why do you dig in the cold ground?" Deho took a deep breath and stepped forward. "We are miners," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need materials to repair our ships. The planet appeared to be empty, so we thought it was safe to work here. We did not know this was your hunting ground." The Valkyrie leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "Hunting ground." It repeated, "This place has no prey. Nothing lives here except the stone worms that burrow deep. We came here to test our young warriors against the stone worms. They are good practice for real hunting." Jae-min, who had been standing behind his captain, suddenly stepped forward. He was young and curious, and apparently not as terrified as everyone else. "Stone worms," he said with excitement. "How big are they? What do they look like? Can you really hunt them?" The other humans stared at Jae-min in shock. But the Valkyrie leader seemed pleased by the question. "The stone worms grow as long as your mining machine," it explained. "They have teeth like crystal, and they can sense movement through solid rock. They are difficult to catch, but their meat is very good. Before anyone could stop him, Jae-min reached into his pack and pulled out an energy bar. He walked toward the massive Valkyrie warrior and held it out. "Would you like to try human food?" he asked with a smile. "We have many different kinds." The Valkyrie leader stared at the small human for a long moment. Its yellow eyes seemed to be studying Jae-min carefully, as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of trick. Then very slowly it reached out with one clawed hand and carefully took the energy bar. Other Valkyrie watched their leader with obvious interest as he examined the human food. He sniffed it carefully, then took a small bite. His eyes widened with surprise, and he quickly finished the rest of the bar. "This is very good," he said to Jae-min. "What do you call this food?" Energy bar. Jae-min replied proudly, "We make them from fruits and nuts and grains from our home planet. They give us strength for hard work." The Valkyrie leader nodded approvingly and said something in his own language to the other warriors. What followed was the strangest 3 hours in human history. The Valkyrie warriors and the human miners sat around the mining camp sharing food and stories. The humans learned that the Valkyrie were not just bloodthirsty killers, they were explorers and hunters who traveled the galaxy seeking new challenges and worthy opponents. The Valkyrie leader, who called himself Razorfang, explained that his people had been watching humans for many years. They were fascinated by the way humans never gave up even when facing impossible odds. They had seen humans charge into battles they could not win and somehow find ways to survive. Bora showed the Valkyrie her mining equipment, and they were very interested in how the machines worked. The Valkyrie had their own technology, but it was designed for hunting and warfare. They had never seen tools designed purely for construction and resource gathering. In return, Razorfang showed the humans some of their hunting techniques. The way they could move silently across any terrain, the way they could track prey by scent alone, the way they could coordinate attacks without making any sound. The humans were amazed by their skill and precision. As the night grew darker, the two groups found themselves talking more freely. The Valkyrie told stories of their greatest hunts, and the humans shared tales of their most dangerous space missions. They discovered that both species valued courage and loyalty above all else. When it was time to part ways, Razorfang approached Captain Daeho. "Your people are not what we expected," he said. "Small hunters, but with big hearts. We have learned much from you today. Perhaps we will meet again someday." Daeho nodded and extended his hand. In the human gesture of friendship, Razorfang studied the outstretched hand for a moment, then carefully grasped it with his own clawed hand. The handshake between human and Valkyrie lasted only a few seconds, but it changed the galaxy forever. As the Valkyrie warriors disappeared into the darkness, the human crew stood in stunned silence. They had just survived an encounter with the most feared species in the galaxy. And not only had they survived, they had made friends. None of them knew it yet, but that meeting on the cold, dead planet would be remembered as the moment when everything changed, the moment when the two deadliest species in the galaxy discovered they had more in common than anyone had ever imagined. 3 weeks after the meeting on Kepler 442b, Captain Daeho sat in his quarters aboard the starship, Thunder staring at the communication device in his hands. He had been trying to contact Razorfang for days, but the Valkyrie hunting bands moved constantly across the galaxy, and finding them was almost impossible. The rest of the human crew thought their captain had lost his mind. They whispered among themselves about how the stress of commanding a mining operation had finally broken him. Nobody believed that the Valkyrie could be reasoned with, or that they would want to maintain contact with humans, but Daeho knew what he had experienced on that cold planet. The connection between the two species had been real and powerful. He had seen the curiosity in Razorfang's eyes when the Valkyrie warrior examined human technology. He had heard the respect in the alien's voice when he spoke about human courage and determination. Finally, after 2 weeks of trying the communication device, crackled to life, a deep voice spoke in heavily accented human language. "Small hunter captain, this is Razorfang. I have been thinking about our meeting. Your people are very strange, but also very interesting." The conversation that followed lasted for hours. Razorfang explained that he had been telling other Valkyrie about the humans he had met. Most of his warriors thought he was making up stories, but some were curious enough to want to meet humans themselves. Daeho suggested that they arrange another meeting, this time with more members of both species. The second meeting took place on a neutral space station in the border regions between human and Valkyrie territory. Daeho brought 5 of his best crew members, including Bo-Ra, the engineer, and Jaemin, the young miner who had first offered food to the Valkyrie. Razor Fang arrived with 6 warriors from his hunting band. The space station operators were terrified when they realized what was happening no one had ever seen. Humans and Valkyrie in the same place without violence breaking out. The station security team prepared for the worst, but the meeting was surprisingly peaceful. Bo-Ra had brought several pieces of human technology to show the Valkyrie, including a portable shield generator and a gravity manipulator. The Valkyrie were fascinated by these devices, especially when Bo-Ra explained how they worked. The humans had developed technology for protection and construction, while the Valkyrie had focused on hunting and warfare. The Valkyrie warrior Sharp Mind, who served as their technology specialist, showed the humans some of their weapons and tools. The humans were amazed by the precision and effectiveness of Valkyrie engineering. Their weapons could adjust their power automatically based on the target, and their tools could repair themselves when damaged. What excited both species most was the possibility of combining their technologies. Bo-Ra worked with Sharp Mind to create a prototype weapon that used human shield technology to protect the user while firing Valkyrie energy bolts. The result was more powerful than anything either species had created alone. During the meeting, they also discovered that both species faced similar problems. Pirates and raiders constantly attacked their trade routes and colonies. The existing galactic government, known as the Hegemony, seemed more interested in keeping humans and Valkyrie fighting each other than in maintaining peace. Commander Sung-Ho, a human military officer who had joined the meeting, suggested that the two species could help each other deal with these threats. The Valkyrie had superior hunting and tracking abilities, while humans had better defensive technology and tactical planning. Working together, they could be unstoppable. Razor Fang was intrigued by this idea, but he explained that any formal alliance would need approval from the Valkyrie War Council. The War Council was made up of the greatest warriors from all the major hunting bands, and they would need to see proof that humans were worthy allies. The proof came sooner than expected. A week after the meeting, pirate ships attacked a human mining colony in the Outer Rim. The pirates were well organized and heavily armed. The human colonial defense force was outnumbered and outgunned. They sent out a desperate call for help. Daeho received the distress signal and immediately contacted Razor Fang. The Valkyrie warrior was intrigued by the opportunity to hunt pirates alongside humans. He gathered his best warriors and met the human rescue fleet at the edge of the battle zone. The joint attack on the pirate base was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human pilots flew escort missions for Valkyrie assault ships, while Valkyrie warriors provided close combat support for human ground troops. The pirates had never faced opponents who combined human tactical planning with Valkyrie fighting abilities. The battle lasted only 4 hours. The pirates were completely overwhelmed by the coordinated assault. Their base was destroyed and their fleet was scattered. The few survivors spread word throughout the criminal underworld that humans and Valkyrie were now working together. News of the joint military operation reached the highest levels of both governments. Human President Haijin called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council, while Valkyrie War Chief Deathbringer summoned the War Council for the first time in decades. The negotiations that followed were complex and difficult. Many humans feared that the Valkyrie would eventually turn on them, and many Valkyrie believed that humans were too weak to be reliable allies, but the success of the joint operation had proven that the two species could work together effectively. Dr. Minho, a human diplomat who specialized in interspecies relations, led the human negotiating team. He worked closely with Bloodspeaker, a Valkyrie diplomat who had spent years studying other species. The two of them gradually built trust between the negotiating teams. A breakthrough came when they agreed to establish a joint colony as a test of the alliance. The colony would be located on a planet that neither species had claimed, and it would be governed by representatives from both governments. If the colony succeeded, it would prove that humans and Valkyrie could live and work together. The planet they chose was called New Harmony, and it became the symbol of what the two species could accomplish together. Human engineers designed the basic infrastructure, while Valkyrie warriors provided security and hunting expertise. The colonists included families from both species who were willing to try something completely new. The first year of New Harmony was difficult. There were cultural misunderstandings and communication problems, but gradually the colonists learned to appreciate each other's strengths. Human children played games with young Valkyrie while their parents worked together on farming and construction projects. The success of New Harmony convinced both governments to sign the formal Unity Pact. The treaty established rules for trade cooperation and mutual defense. It also created the Alliance Council, a governing body with equal representation from both species. The signing ceremony took place on New Harmony with representatives from across both civilizations. President Hyjin and War Chief Deathbringer signed the treaty while Captain Daeho and Razorfang stood beside them as witnesses, the two individuals who had started it all with a simple handshake on a cold planet. When news of the Unity Pact spread throughout the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and intense. Other species that had survived by playing humans and Valkyrie against each other suddenly found themselves facing a united front. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted overnight. The hegemony leadership called emergency meetings and began planning responses to the new alliance. But they underestimated how quickly the partnership between humans and Valkyrie would develop. The two species that had been enemies for so long were now working together with frightening efficiency. As the second part of the story ended, the galaxy watched nervously as the two most dangerous species began sharing technology, resources, and military tactics. The Unity Pact was just the beginning of changes that would reshape the entire galactic civilization. The news of the Unity Pact between humans and Valkyrie spread across the galaxy faster than a supernova explosion. Within hours of the signing ceremony, every major species had received reports about the alliance. The reactions ranged from disbelief to panic to outright terror. The Zentari Council, which had governed galactic politics for over 3,000 years, called an emergency session for the first time in 2 centuries. The council chambers on the planet Zentara Prime had not seen such chaos since the last Great War. Ambassadors from dozens of species shouted accusations and demands while trying to figure out how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Ambassador Tae-young represented humanity at the emergency session. He was a calm and experienced diplomat who had spent years negotiating with other species. But even he was surprised by the intensity of the reaction when he entered the council chambers. The other ambassadors stared at him like he was carrying a dangerous weapon. The Valkyrie representative Bloodspeaker arrived an hour later, and the reaction was even more dramatic. Several ambassadors actually fled the chamber when the 8-foot-tall warrior diplomat entered. Many species had never seen a Valkyrie in person, and his presence filled the room with an atmosphere of barely controlled fear. The hegemony spokesperson, Chancellor Vexstar, was the first to speak. He was a member of the Gromax species, known for their political cunning and their ability to manipulate other civilizations. He stood up and pointed directly at the human and Valkyrie representatives. This alliance is a threat to galactic civilization, he declared in a voice that echoed through the chamber. For thousands of years, the galaxy has maintained peace by keeping the two most dangerous species separated. Now they have united, and we are all in danger. The Zentari Council leader, Ancient Mind, nodded slowly. The Zentari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and they had survived by being very careful about potential threats. This alliance changes everything, he said in his whispering voice. The balance of power has been destroyed. We must decide how to respond. But not everyone was opposed to the alliance. The Quillen Ambassador Softsong stood up to speak. The Quillen were a peaceful species known for their wisdom and their ability to see the good in other civilizations. I have visited the colony on New Harmony, she said in her musical voice. What I saw there was not dangerous but beautiful. Two species learning to work together and create something new. The debate continued for 3 days. Representatives from over 40 species argued about whether the Human-Valkyrie alliance was a threat or an opportunity. Some demanded immediate military action while others called for diplomatic engagement. The galaxy was dividing into 2 camps. Meanwhile, on New Harmony, the colonists were experiencing their own challenges. The arrival of observers from other species had created new tensions. Some aliens came to study the colony while others came to spy or sabotage. The colonists had to deal with constant visitors while trying to build their new society young. Hey, one was one of the first human children born. On New Harmony, she had grown up playing with Velkari children and spoke both languages fluently. At age 10, she had become an unofficial ambassador helping adult visitors understand how the two species lived together when a group of hegemony investigators arrived to examine the colony. Hay1 was assigned to guide them around. They expected to find evidence of human Velkari conflict or signs that one species was dominating the other. Instead, they found something that challenged all their assumptions about how different species could interact. Investigators watched human and Velkari engineers working together to build new housing. They saw mixed families where humans and Velkari had adopted children from both species. They observed joint hunting parties where humans provided technology while Velkari provided tracking skills. Most surprising of all was the colony school where human and Velkari children learned together. The investigators watched a class where young humans were learning Velkari hunting techniques while young Velkari practiced human problem-solving methods. The cooperation was so natural that the children seemed puzzled by the investigators' questions. The hegemony team left New Harmony confused and worried. Their report to the hegemony leadership was deeply troubling. The alliance was not just a military partnership, but a genuine cultural fusion that was creating something entirely new. Back on their respective homeworlds, both human and Velkari populations were dealing with their own reactions to the alliance. Many humans feared that the Velkari would eventually turn on them, and many Velkari worried that cooperation with humans would make them soft and weak. General Kite, commander of the human colonial defense force, was one of the skeptics. He had spent his career preparing to fight the Velkari and found it difficult to accept them as allies. When the first joint military exercises were planned, he volunteered to observe and report on Velkari combat effectiveness. The exercises took place on a barren moon where both species could test their combined tactics without disturbing civilian populations. Human soldiers worked alongside Velkari warriors in scenarios designed to test their ability to coordinate under pressure. General Kite watched in amazement as human and Velkari units moved together with perfect timing. Human soldiers provided covering fire while Velkari warriors closed in for melee combat. Velkari stealth specialists guided human snipers to optimal positions. The two species complemented each other perfectly. The climax of the exercises came when both forces had to work together to capture a fortified position. The human soldiers used their technology to disable the defenses, while the Velkari used their hunting skills to approach without being detected. The assault was flawless, and the position was taken without a single casualty. After the exercises, General Kite approached War Master Clawstrike. The Velkari commander, your warriors are impressive, he said with genuine respect. I have never seen such coordination between different species. Clawstrike replied with what might have been a smile, your soldiers are clever and brave, a good combination for hunting dangerous prey. The success of the military exercises convinced many skeptics that the alliance could work, but it also increased fear among other species. The hegemony began spreading propaganda about the threat posed by the human Velkari partnership. They funded terrorist attacks on alliance colonies and sabotaged trade agreements. The propaganda campaign was extensive and well-funded. Holovids showed dramatic recreations of human and Velkari forces conquering peaceful worlds. News reports claimed that the alliance was secretly planning to dominate the galaxy. Political leaders warned that cooperation with the alliance would lead to enslavement or worse. Some species were convinced by the propaganda and began preparing for war. The Scaros Empire started building new warships and recruiting soldiers. The Mandorian Commonwealth created defensive alliances with other species. The galaxy was becoming more militarized and dangerous, but the propaganda had an unexpected effect. Instead of isolating the human Velkari alliance, it actually drew attention to their successes. Species that had been ignored or mistreated by the hegemony began to wonder if the alliance might offer them better opportunities. The breakthrough came when the Quillen officially requested to join the alliance. The Quillen were respected throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and neutrality. Their decision to support the human Velkari partnership gave other species permission to reconsider their positions. Within 6 months after the Quillen Joint delegations from 12 other species had arrived at New Harmony. To discuss possible membership, the alliance was growing faster than anyone had expected, and the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting dramatically. The hegemony leadership realized that their propaganda campaign had backfired. Instead of destroying the alliance they had helped it grow, they began planning more direct action. Military buildup continued while diplomatic efforts focused on preventing more species from joining the alliance. As the third part of the story ended, the galaxy was clearly divided into two camps. The old order, represented by the hegemony, was losing support while the new alliance was gaining strength. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The children playing together on New Harmony had no idea that their simple friendship was reshaping the political structure of the galaxy, but their parents knew that the peaceful world they were building might soon have to be defended against those who saw it as a threat. The starship Unity was the most advanced vessel ever built by the Human Valkyrie Alliance. It was 3 times larger than any previous exploration ship and carried a crew of 200 beings from both species. The ship represented everything the Alliance hoped to achieve: cooperation between different cultures and the sharing of knowledge and technology. Captain So Young had been chosen to command the Unity. Because of her experience with interspecies relations, she had served on mixed crews for over 15 years and understood how to manage the complex dynamics between humans and Valkyrie. Her co-commander Huntmaster Steelfang was equally experienced in working with other species. The Unity's mission was to explore the unknown regions, a dangerous area of space that no species had ever successfully mapped. The region was filled with radiation storms, gravitational anomalies, and other hazards that made navigation extremely difficult. Several previous expeditions had disappeared without a trace. The crew had trained for 2 years to work as a unified team. Human engineers worked alongside Valkyrie technicians, human soldiers trained with Valkyrie warriors. The ship's systems were designed to accommodate both species with controls that could be operated by either human hands or Valkyrie claws. 3 weeks into their journey, the Unity encountered something that changed everything. The ship's sensors detected a massive object floating in the void between star systems. It was clearly artificial, but unlike anything in the databases of either species. The object was larger than most moons and covered with technology that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Chief Engineer Kite ran detailed scans of the mysterious object, while Valkyrie Sensor Master Voidwalker analyzed the energy patterns they were detecting. The readings were confusing and contradictory. The object appeared to be both ancient and highly advanced at the same time. Captain So Young called a meeting of the senior staff to discuss their options. The safe choice would be to mark the object's location and return to Alliance space with their discovery, but the crew had not come this far to play it safe. They had come to explore and discover. The decision to investigate was unanimous. The Unity approached the object slowly, with all defensive systems ready. The closer they got, the more amazing the object became. It was covered with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Huntmaster Steelfang was the first to recognize what they were seeing. "This is a prison," he said quietly. "I have seen similar technology on ancient battlefields. The object is designed to hold something inside and keep it from escaping." The discovery that the object was a prison raised new questions. What was being held inside, and why had it been placed in this remote location? The energy readings suggested that whatever was inside was still alive after thousands or maybe millions of years. Dr. Minho, the ship's chief medical officer, detected life signs inside the object, but they were unlike anything he had ever seen. The readings showed thousands of different biological signatures, as if the prison held beings from many different species. The mystery deepened when they discovered that the prison was sending out distress signals in hundreds of different languages. The messages were weak and fragmented, but they were clearly calls for help. The beings inside were asking to be rescued. Chief Engineer Kite and Sensor Master Voidwalker worked together to analyze the prison structure. They discovered that it was slowly failing. The systems that had kept the prisoners alive for so long were breaking down. Without intervention, all the life inside would die within days. The rescue operation required everything that humans and Valkyrie could offer. The prison was protected by automated defense systems that attacked anything that approached. The defenses were ancient but still deadly, capable of destroying ships, much larger than the Unity Huntmaster. Steel Fang led the first assault team against the defense system's Valkyrie. Warriors used their natural stealth abilities to approach the automated weapons, while human soldiers provided covering fire. The combination of Valkyrie agility and human firepower proved effective against the ancient defenses, but destroying the defenses was only the beginning. The prison's security systems were designed to kill all the prisoners if anyone tried to free them. It was a cruel trap left by whatever species had built the prison. The only way to save the prisoners was to completely rewrite the prisons. Programming engineer Kite and technician Voidwalker worked frantically to understand the alien programming language. They had to break through security systems that had been designed by minds completely different from their own. The work was complicated by the fact that one wrong move would kill thousands of innocent beings. The programming work took 18 hours of continuous effort. The two engineers worked without rest, their minds focused completely on the complex problem. Human creativity and Valkyrie precision combined to solve puzzles that had been designed to be unsolvable, while the engineers worked. The ship's medical team prepared for the rescue operation. Dr. Minho worked with Valkyrie healer Moonclaw to create treatment protocols for beings who had been in stasis for millions of years. They had no idea what condition the prisoners would be in when they were finally freed. The breakthrough came when Kite realized that the prison's programming was based on mathematical principles that were universal across all species. Once he understood this, he was able to find patterns in the alien code that allowed him to rewrite the security systems. The moment of liberation was both beautiful and terrifying. The prison's outer shell opened like a flower, revealing chambers filled with beings from species that had been extinct for millions of years. The prisoners were weak and confused, but they were alive. The rescue operation took 3 days. Human and Valkyrie medical teams worked together to treat beings whose biology was completely unknown. Emergency medical procedures had to be invented on the spot as they encountered new forms of life. The rescued prisoners represented 47 different species, most of which had been destroyed by the same ancient race that had built the prison. The prisoners were scientists, artists, and philosophers who had been preserved as the last examples of their civilizations. The return journey to Alliance space was triumphant but also sobering. The Unity carried with it the last survivors of dozens of civilizations. The responsibility was enormous, but the crew handled it with dignity and care. When news of the rescue reached the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and intense. The Alliance had just performed the greatest rescue operation in recorded history. They had saved thousands. The success of the Unity mission created shockwaves throughout the galaxy that continued for months. The rescue of thousands of beings from extinct civilizations had captured the imagination of species everywhere. The Alliance was no longer seen as a dangerous experiment, but as a beacon of hope for cooperation and discovery. The Hegemony leadership met in emergency session on their capital world of Dominion. Prime Chancellor Vexstar paced back and forth in the council chamber while military commanders and political advisors argued about how to respond to the growing Alliance threat. We cannot allow this to continue, Vexstar declared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. The Alliance grows stronger every day. More species are requesting membership, and they bring advanced technology with them. If we do not act soon, we will lose control of the galaxy entirely. General Mordock, commander of the Hegemony military forces, agreed with the Chancellor. The Alliance military capabilities are already formidable, he reported. Their combination of human tactics and Valkyrie combat skills makes them nearly unbeatable in direct confrontation. We need a different approach. The solution they chose was economic warfare. The Hegemony controlled most of the major trade routes in the galaxy, and they began using this power to strangle the Alliance. They established blockades at key jump points and refused to allow ships carrying Alliance goods to pass through. Hegemony space. The blockade was designed to force the Alliance to submit by cutting off their access to essential resources. The Hegemony believed that economic pressure would be more effective than military action because it would turn the Alliance member species against each other when resources became scarce, but the blockade had unexpected consequences. Instead of weakening the alliance, it forced them to become more creative and self-sufficient. The rescued species had knowledge of ancient trade routes that had been forgotten for millions of years. They showed Alliance navigators how to reach distant star systems without using the main commercial pathways. Admiral Deho, now in command of the Alliance exploration fleet, worked with War Chief Razorfang to coordinate the response to the blockade. They decided to use Operation Breakthrough, a massive coordinated effort to break through the hegemony blockade and establish new trade routes. The operation required careful planning and perfect timing. Alliance fleets would strike at multiple blockade points, simultaneously using the element of surprise to overwhelm the hegemony forces. The key was to move so quickly that the enemy could not coordinate an effective response. Commander Dejing lead the largest breakthrough force. Her fleet consisted of ships from 6 different Alliance species, including humans, Valkyrie, and several of the rescued civilizations. The diversity of the fleet was both a strength and a challenge because each species had different fighting styles and tactical preferences. The breakthrough began at exactly the same moment across 12 different star systems. Alliance forces appeared out of hyperspace at the edge of blockade zones and immediately launched coordinated attacks. The hegemony forces were caught completely off guard. Commander Dejin's fleet targeted the main blockade at the Centauri Junction, one of the most important trade crossroads in the galaxy. The hegemony had stationed over 50 warships there. Believing that the position was impregnable, the Alliance attack was unlike anything the hegemony defenders had ever seen. Human ships equipped with Valkyrie stealth technology appeared inside the blockade formation before the defenders realized they were under attack. Valkyrie warriors boarded enemy ships while human engineers disabled their weapons and engines. The battle lasted only 3 hours before the hegemony forces retreated in complete disorder. The Alliance had not only broken through the blockade but had captured supplies and intelligence that would help them plan future operations. Similar victories occurred across all 12 target systems. The hegemony blockade collapsed in a single day as Alliance forces opened new trade routes and established their own checkpoints. The economic warfare strategy had backfired spectacularly. The failure of the blockade convinced many neutral species that the hegemony was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. Delegations from over 20 species arrived at New Harmony within weeks of the breakthrough, requesting to join the Alliance, but the most significant defection came from within the hegemony itself. The Mandorian Commonwealth announced that they were leaving the hegemony and requesting Alliance membership. The Mandorians controlled several key industrial worlds, and their departure dealt a severe blow to hegemony manufacturing capacity. The domino effect continued as more hegemony member species followed. The Mandorian example: within 6 months, the hegemony had lost nearly half of its member species and much of its economic base. The old galactic order was crumbling. Chancellor Vextar made one final desperate attempt to maintain power. He announced that the hegemony was declaring war on the Alliance and called upon all loyal species to join the fight against what he called the greatest threat to galactic civilization. The declaration of war was met with mixed reactions. Some species rallied to the hegemony cause, believing that the Alliance really was a threat to their independence, but many others saw the declaration as proof that the hegemony leadership had lost touch with reality. The first major battle of the war took place at the planet Zarian, a key industrial world that both sides needed to control. The hegemony assembled the largest fleet in their history, while the Alliance responded with a combined force representing over 30 different species. Admiral Deho and War Chief Razorfang commanded the Alliance forces, while General Mordock led the hegemony fleet. The battle would determine whether the old order could survive, or if the new Alliance would become the dominant power in the galaxy. The Battle of Zarian lasted for 2 days and involved over 1,000 ships from both sides. The fighting was intense and desperate, with both fleets taking heavy casualties, but the Alliance forces proved superior in coordination and tactics. The turning point came when the rescued species revealed weapons technology that had been lost for millions of years. Ancient energy weapons that could phase through shields and disruptor fields that disabled entire enemy squadrons turned the tide of battle. Hegemony fleet retreated in disorder, leaving behind damaged ships and demoralized crews. The victory at Zarian demonstrated that the Alliance was now the strongest military force in the galaxy. The old order was finished. In the aftermath of the battle, many of the remaining hegemony species announced their intention to join the Alliance. They had seen enough evidence that cooperation was more effective than conflict. The galaxy was choosing sides, and most were choosing the Alliance as the fifth part of. The story ended. The hegemony was reduced to a handful of core worlds, while the Alliance controlled most of the galaxy. The stage was set for the final transformation as the old political system gave way to something entirely new. The collapse of the hegemony happened faster than anyone had predicted. Within a year of the Battle of Zarian, the once mighty coalition controlled only a dozen star systems, while the Alliance had grown to include over 200 species. The old galactic order was finished. The final act came when the remaining hegemony worlds voted to dissolve their government and request membership in the Alliance Chancellor. Vexstar and his closest supporters fled to the Outer Rim rather than face trial. For war crimes, the galaxy was finally united under a single peaceful government. President Hyjin and War Chief Deathbringer announced the formation of the United Galactic Federation at a ceremony on New Harmony. The new government would be based on the principles that had made the Human-Valkyrie Alliance successful: cooperation, mutual respect, and shared decision-making. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now working together on massive construction projects. The Federation's first priority was rebuilding the infrastructure that had been damaged during the war. Engineer Kite, now serving as the Federation's chief of development, worked with representatives from dozens of species to design new cities that could accommodate beings with completely different environmental needs. The engineering challenges were enormous, but the solutions were creative and innovative. The cultural changes were even more dramatic than the political ones. The University of New Harmony became the galaxy's greatest center of learning, with students and teachers from hundreds of worlds. Young beings who had grown up during the Alliance period saw cooperation as natural and normal. Artist Taewon, who had grown up on New Harmony as one of the first human children to befriend Valkyrie youth, became a symbol of the new galactic culture. Her paintings and sculptures combined artistic traditions from dozens of species, creating entirely new forms of beauty. The economic benefits of cooperation were immediate and obvious. Trade flourished as species shared their resources and knowledge freely. Transportation networks that had taken weeks to traverse now required only days. Communication systems connected every inhabited world in real-time. Dr. Minho established the Federation Medical Corps, an organization dedicated to sharing medical knowledge among all member species. Diseases that had plagued individual species for centuries were cured within months when researchers from different worlds worked together. The most ambitious project was the Great Survey, an attempt to map every star system in the galaxy and search for other civilizations that might need help. Admiral Deho commanded the survey fleets, while War Chief Razorfang oversaw security for the exploration missions. The survey ships were marvels of cooperative engineering, human navigation systems, guided vessels built with Valkyrie materials and powered by energy sources developed by the rescued species. Each ship carried a crew representing dozens of different species, all working together. The discoveries made by the survey teams exceeded everyone's expectations. They found ancient ruins that revealed the history of extinct civilizations they discovered, new forms of life that challenged existing scientific theories. They even encountered a few surviving colonies of species that had been thought destroyed. One of the most important discoveries was a network of ancient transportation gates that connected distant parts of the galaxy. The gates had been built millions of years ago by a species that had vanished long before any current civilization arose. Reactivating the gate network made travel between distant worlds almost instantaneous. The Federation also had to deal with the remnants of the old conflicts. Pirate bands and criminal organizations that had thrived during the hegemony period were still active in remote regions. Federation peacekeeping forces worked to eliminate these threats while offering rehabilitation to criminals who surrendered. War Master Clawstrike led the Federation Peacekeeping Corps, a mixed force of volunteers from many species. The peacekeepers were trained not just to fight, but to negotiate and mediate conflicts. Their goal was to resolve problems without violence whenever possible. The most touching aspect of the new galactic order was the emergence of mixed communities. Young beings from different species formed friendships and partnerships that transcended traditional boundaries. Adoption across species lines became common as families opened their homes to children from other worlds. The children of the Federation grew up speaking multiple languages and understanding different cultural traditions. They saw diversity as strength rather than a source of conflict. These young beings became ambassadors for the new civilization, carrying its values to every corner of the galaxy. The Federation also faced challenges. Some species struggled to adapt to the new cooperative model. Traditional hierarchies and power structures were difficult to change. Patience and understanding were required to help everyone adjust to the new reality. But the benefits of cooperation far outweighed the difficulties. Scientific advancement accelerated as researchers shared their knowledge. Cultural expression flourished as artists drew inspiration from multiple traditions. Economic prosperity increased as trade barriers disappeared. The story of how the two deadliest species united and changed the galaxy became legend. Parents told their children about Captain Deho and Razorfang, who had started it all with a simple handshake on a cold planet. The meeting that had seemed impossible became the foundation of a new civilization. Ambassador Tae-young established the Federation Diplomatic Corps, an organization dedicated to peaceful resolution of conflicts. The diplomats were trained in the customs and languages of all member species. They worked to prevent misunderstandings before they could lead to larger problems. The Federation's success attracted attention from beyond the galaxy. Long-range sensors detected signals from other galactic clusters. Some of these signals appeared to be messages from other civilizations. The Federation began preparing for the possibility of contact with truly alien species. As the story concluded, the galaxy had been completely transformed. The marriage of human creativity and Valkyrie precision had created something greater than either species could have achieved alone. But more than that, it had proven that former enemies could become the closest allies. The Federation continued to grow as new species were discovered and welcomed. The future looked bright for a galaxy that had learned the most important lesson of all, that cooperation was stronger than conflict, and that diversity was a source of strength rather than division. The children playing together in the parks of new harmony represented the hope of the galaxy. They had grown up in a world where different species worked together naturally. They would carry that vision forward as they became the leaders of tomorrow. The story that had begun with two species meeting on a dead planet had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization. The two deadliest species had indeed united, and the galaxy had not lost its mind. Instead, it had found its heart.